You know, when you hear the name Joy Division, what's the first thing that pops into your head? It's more than just music, right? It's a whole vibe. It's this cold, stark atmosphere that they somehow managed to capture in just 2 studio albums. They weren't just a band, they were like architects, building a sonic blueprint that a whole generation of musicians would follow.
And this quote, wow, it just nails it. Their music wasn't just about their environment, it was the environment. I mean, you can practically hear the rust, the cold concrete. It's the sound of an old world just dying off, and this new, kind of unsettling world being born. So, that's the big question, isn't it? How do they pull this off? It really wasn't an accident. It was this perfect storm, you know? A forgotten city, some radical new studio tech, and, of course, the brilliant but ultimately tragic mind of their frontman.
All right, so here's how we're going to deconstruct this. First, we'll look at their massive influence, this echo from space. Then, we'll hit rewind and go right back to their start in bleak 1970s Manchester. After that, we'll get into their revolutionary sound, explore the man behind the lyrics, Ian Curtis, and finally, see how their legacy literally transformed after tragedy.
Okay, first things first, we have to talk about the massive shadow this band still casts today. It's huge. This isn't some obscure cult band that only a few people know about. No, their musical DNA is like hardwired into decades of music and culture that came after them. I mean, the list of bands who basically owe them everything is just staggering. You've got U2's soaring guitars, The Cure's deep, dark introspection, the industrial grind of 9 Inch Nails. You can hear Joy Division in all of them. But it goes way beyond the sound. Just think about that t-shirt. You know the one, the white squiggly lines on a black background? That's from their first album, Unknown Pleasures. It has become this global icon, a piece of code that even people who've never heard a single song can recognize.
So where on earth did a sound like this come from? Well, the answer isn't in some fancy recording studio. No, it's in the streets of Manchester, back in the mid-1970s. You really cannot understand this band without understanding that city at that exact moment in time.
Yeah, forget all those images of swinging London in the 60s. This was a totally different England. This was a city of gray skies, crumbling old mills, and just this profound sense of being completely left behind. That feeling of being trapped, of cold, empty space, that's not just in the lyrics. It's baked right into the sound of the guitars, the bass, the drums.
And then, a spark. In June of '76, Bernard Sumner and Peter Hook go to see the Sex Pistols. And that gig, it was electrifying. The message was simple. You don't need to be a guitar god. You just need to have something to say. So they immediately form a band, called Warsaw at first. They find their voice in Ian Curtis and their engine in drummer Stephen Morris, whose style was so relentless and precise he was like a human drum machine. By 1978, they had a new, much more provocative name, Joy Division.
And this is a really crucial point. They weren't just another punk band. They were at the very front of this new movement called post-punk. See, if punk was like throwing a Molotov cocktail, just pure outward rage, post-punk was the slow, eerie burn that came after. It took all that energy and turned it inward, creating these atmospheric, experimental soundscapes that were all about alienation and anxiety. Now, the band had the raw talent, for sure. But to forge that talent into something legendary, they needed some help. They needed collaborators. And this is the real turning point, where a tiny record label called Factory Records basically built an entire creative world around them. This wasn't just a band anymore. It was a whole collective. You had Tony Wilson, the visionary label boss, Rob Gretton, their manager who fiercely protected them, Peter Saville, the designer who gave them that stark, unforgettable look. But maybe the most crucial person of all was Martin Hannett, the producer. He was basically the 5th member in the studio, and he completely revolutionized their sound. See, Hannett didn't just record the band, he took them apart and rebuilt them. Let's just talk about the drums for a second. He made their drummer, Stephen Morris, record every single part of his kit, the snare, the kick, the cymbals, separately, one by one. It was totally unheard of, and it drove Morris crazy. Then Hannett would feed those individual sounds through these brand new digital delay machines to create these icy, almost inhuman rhythms. He'd even put speakers in the studio bathroom to record the echo. And what did the band think of all this? Oh, they hated it. They absolutely hated it. They saw themselves as this loud, aggressive, raw live band. The bassist, Peter Hook, famously complained that Hannett had stripped all the power out and made them sound like Pink Floyd. They thought he had totally betrayed their energy. But here's the thing, they were wrong. Hannett heard something in their music that even they couldn't hear yet. He hadn't gotten rid of the power, he had just transformed it. He created this sonic landscape of space and dread and this cold, futuristic kind of beauty. He captured the sound of that Mancunian damp and broadcast it out to the whole world. He proved that what works in a sweaty club and what works on a record can be two completely different but equally powerful things. And this futuristic sound was perfectly matched by their look. So, that famous album cover, it's not just some abstract drawing. It's actual scientific data. It's a graph of the radio signals from a pulsar, a dead spinning star. The band literally found it in an astronomy encyclopedia and just gave it to the designer. It was the perfect visual metaphor. A cold, rhythmic, mysterious signal coming from deep, dark space. But all of this sound, this design, it was all built to house one thing, the voice and the words of frontman Ian Curtis. And you really cannot separate this music from his profound and ultimately very tragic story. Curtis was like a librarian of despair. His lyrics were incredibly literary. He was soaking up the work of authors who wrote about alienation, urban decay, and these suffocating systems of control. He wasn't just writing about simple heartbreak. He was channeling the technological horror of J.G. Ballard and the bureaucratic nightmares of Kafka, and he distilled all those huge ideas into this stark, powerful poetry. But a myth very quickly started to build up around him. The myth of the tortured artist. The reality, though, was so much more complicated and just sad. Curtis was battling a severe epilepsy diagnosis. The medication he was on had these awful side effects, and the stress of being in a band was making everything worse. His famous erratic dancing on stage? Well, that wasn't some performance art. It was often a painful public struggle with his own body, a physical symptom of his illness. On May 18th, 1980, right on the eve of the band's very first American tour, the tour that was supposed to make them global stars, Ian Curtis died by suicide. He was just 23 years old. But the story doesn't end there. In the wake of this unimaginable tragedy, the sound and the spirit of the band were somehow reborn, creating a legacy that continues to echo even today.
The perfect bridge between Joy Division and what came next can be heard in a single song, Ceremony. It was one of the last things they wrote with Ian. In fact, the very last recording of Joy Division as a band is a rehearsal of this track, just 4 days before he died. The surviving members had a pact not to continue under that name, so they reformed as New Order. And their very first single? It was Ceremony. A powerful, tangible link to their past and a defiant first step into their future.
The band's myth has become so powerful that it's been told and retold on the big screen over and over. You have the chaotic, funny take in 24-Hour Party People, and then the stark, beautiful, and heartbreaking biopic Control. Filmmakers just keep coming back to this story, making sure the band's history gets passed on to new generations.
And that really is the ultimate legacy of Joy Division. They answered this huge question, can you take noise and decay and turn it into something timeless? And the answer was yes. They took the physical and emotional landscape of their dying city, all the grit, the empty space, the anxiety, and they forged it into something universal. They created monumental art that still feels just as cold, as beautiful, and as absolutely necessary as it did over 40 years ago.